Welcome back to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay, and we're coming from Beirut. Now joining us is Professor Fawaz Traboulsi. Thanks for joining us, Professor.
Thank you.
So let me just let people know you're a political activist, you're a prolific writer. Your most recent book is A History of Modern Lebanon. So in the first segment, we talked a bit about the banking class, I guess you could say, which is also divided by sect, I guess, the beginning of the roots of Hezbollah. But take us back to about 68, 70. How does Lebanon become one of the front lines of struggle with Israel and the Palestinians? And then relate that also to the development of the sectarian struggle here.
Well, 68 is a turning point in the sense that, as you know, the emergence of the Palestinian armed struggle was in 65. In 68, the Palestinian Fida'in, the Palestinian guerrilla, were operating mainly in Jordan, and they established the first bases in Lebanon. With the acquiescence of the Lebanese government, actually, to start with. But then with the development of incursions into Palestine, occupied Palestine territories, came the Israeli retaliation. So in a way you can say that Lebanon has been in war with Israel since 1968. An uninterrupted war. Yeah.
So talk a bit about 1970 and how that changed the complexity of things here.
Of course, but with Black September and the eviction of both the PLO as such, the PLO as institutions, and the PLO as armed organizations, the majority of them settled in Lebanon.
So just for viewers that don't know the story here, in 1970, Jordan expels thousands of Palestinian fighters.
In a bloody civil war initiated by the Jordanian army. And the whole setup, the whole institutions of the PLO, plus the multitude of organizations and their military personnel were evicted to Syria, and then from Syria, many came over to Lebanon. So 1970, the only armed struggle of the Palestinians was from Lebanese territory. Of course, that was in itself a burden on Lebanon, but you had a Lebanese population and an Arab population which was very much challenged by the defeat of the Arab armies in 1967 and the famous June War with Israel. So there was a lot of sympathy with this guerrilla warfare.
In Lebanon, there's sympathy from the Muslim section of Lebanon. Did Christian Lebanon sympathize with this as well?
Actually, at the beginning, when the operations were mainly from the south into occupied territories, there was a lot of enthusiasm all over the place. Then, when the existence of Palestinian armed organizations got necessarily involved in the Lebanese situation, mainly from 1964 to 1974, the country witnessed a huge amount of social movements all over the place, which had a lot to do with the collapse of the patronage system, which had a lot to do with the very rapid capitalist development of the country. And so you had every sector of the Lebanese population was in the street asking for something. The students never left the streets. The working class had a very strong trade union organization, which had a comprehensive program for all wage earners. And you had all the middle class syndicates, not to speak of the countryside. So you can safely say that not one sector of the Lebanese population was left outside everything. It was against high cost of living, it was for a more democratic education, it was for the right of agricultural workers and peasants to organize, it was for social security, it was for the defense of national production, of national industry. All this was encapsulated, if you want, in 10 years And so and all were frustrated in both senses. Not one single demand was met. And then you had all this social and economic mobility needed to be represented in the institutions, and the institutions were so inelastic that none found their way.
Talk a bit about the institutions, this confessionalism.
The country was still run by landed property politicians who are becoming capitalized.
So remind us again what years we're talking about here.
We're talking about 64 to 74. We're talking about a political system which is based on one identity of the Lebanese, imposing on the Lebanese to have the rights defined, and their political representation defined as members of one of the 17 religious sects. So this, what we call sectarianism, this system, in fact, imposed a real distortion of the whole representativity of the Lebanese, in the sense that your social identity was, your class identity was never recognized. So you exist politically as a member of a sect.
Give us some examples how that worked.
There was a ratio of 6 to 5 of Christians, 6 to Muslims in all government posts. The President of the Republic had to be a Christian Maronite, the Speaker of Parliament a Shiite, and the Prime Minister a Sunni. So that ratio of 6 to 5 was in the administration, in the parliamentary representation, and in cabinet. To start with, you have a discrimination in the representation against Muslims in general.
So if you're working at a factory, and you're in one union, and in your union there could be Christian workers, Shia workers, Sunni workers, but when you go to vote, you have to vote as your ethnic identity, not...
More important than that, by that time, Lebanon had become very much urbanized because because of the control of the banks and of banking and commerce, the countryside was capitalized, was commodified, and traditional agriculture simply collapsed. So you have very rapid urbanization from countryside to the cities. Also for the south, Israeli retaliation pushed tens of thousands of Shiite southerners to Lebanon. So by the 60s, you had a real misery belt from Christians, Sunnis, and Shiites all around Beirut. More importantly, you had an education system that was also developing very well, and throwing thousands of educated people into the market without any real jobs. So there was a real crisis. Social frustration could easily slip into sectarian strife, because the only legitimate representation of people was not on their economic, professional, social identity, but on their sectarian identity. So in a sense, social frustration helped a lot the exacerbation of sectarian frustration.
In the next segment of our interview, let's talk about the birth and development of the militias. Thanks for joining us on the Real News Network, and please join us for the next segment of our interview with Fawaz Traboulsi.